So hopefully you've clicked on here because you're interested in moving to the UK, or you've decided to move to the UK, or you're thinking about moving to the UK, and if you did, or if you are, what will you do about the car? So this presentation has been designed to help you think through whether moving your car to the UK is something for you, how much it's going to cost, what are the processes, and how long is it going to take. So if that's you, then let's dive in. Hi, my name is Philip Lacane. Thank you for joining this presentation on shipping your car to the UK. In this tutorial we will discuss the ins and outs of shipping your car to the UK. This presentation, as I said in the introduction, is intended to be a primer. It is not intended to be definitive or exhaustive on the themes it covers, but it is intended to make navigating the process of importing your car to the UK seem less daunting. We will use New Zealand as an example, and we will hopefully by the end of this presentation convince you that even though you might have dismissed initially the process of importing your car to the UK as too expensive, too complex, or too daunting, that this is in fact possible, may not be as expensive as you thought, and may actually be something you want to do as a viable option when considering your move to the UK. I've structured this training around the following topics. Reasons for your shipping your car, so this discusses why you might actually want to ship your car. The import process, which will talk briefly about the high-level steps involved for getting goods out of a country onto a ship, then off a ship through customs into another country, and in this case it will be the UK. Getting started on your research. This section discusses why you might want to ship your vehicle to the UK and therefore what information you might want to collect and consider when weighing up your options before you make your decision. Shipping talks about the shipping process, where to find the costs and the information you might need to collect or have on hand to make this work properly. Arrival. This section will talk about what you'll need to do when the vehicle arrives in the UK to clear customs. Once the car has cleared customs, you will need to get it registered. So the Getting Registered section will talk about the process of getting the vehicle registered and will offer some options to investigate and some indicative costs for completing the process. These will all need to be factored into your overall budget. Finally, we'll talk briefly about getting your car insured. In the UK, all cars and drivers must be insured, and this section gives a few pointers about getting imported vehicles insured so you can drive them on the road. There are a number of reasons you might want to ship your car. Mainly they boil down to economic and emotional reasons. Some cars are cheaper to buy in New Zealand, for example, or outside the EU than they are in the UK. So if you import your vehicle from New Zealand or outside the UK to the UK, you might find that they increase in value, and therefore you've got a better car in the UK than you would have had you spent the same money inside the UK once you'd arrived. On the other hand, you might find that your car has depreciated in value. Your car may not be that old and may have done many miles or kilometers, but its value has dropped. The difference between the UK purchase price and selling prices in New Zealand may mean that the cost of retaining your vehicle is similar or less than selling your car in New Zealand before you go and then buying a car when you've returned to the UK. The car is a right-hand drive, similar to the UK if you're in New Zealand or Australia or Malaysia, so it may make sense anyway to bring it across to the United Kingdom rather than sell it or put it in long-term storage. If you have a collector's car or something that's not worth selling because you think it may go up in value, you may also find that shipping might be cheaper than storage, and certainly you'd have access and the pleasure of driving it, which then moves into the emotional reasons. Often we see cars as an extension of our own bodies, and we see them as subconsciously it is an expression of our values and status. But you may just like the car that you have and want to keep it. And why shouldn't you? Why shouldn't you drive it in the UK? It would be a shame to sell it. So all of the above reasons are reasons to investigate whether shipping your car to the UK is an option for you and worth taking. So the information that we're going to look at in this section will help give you a head start in working this out and give you peace of mind. Now we will talk about the import-export process. This is really important that we understand this and have a good visualization of what it looks like in our minds before we proceed, as this governs most of what needs to happen to get our car out of New Zealand and into the UK. If you note here, New Zealand is a third country. That is because the UK still subscribes to the EU customs regulations and makes a distinction between the UK, other EU countries, and third countries such as New Zealand. In order to get your vehicle to the UK, your vehicle will need to go through customs clearance in New Zealand as an export. That means if you take a shipping or freight forwarder to look after your shipments, you will need to provide them with documents, and they will then use those documents to process export formalities. These will then go to customs. Customs will clear your car. The shipper will then find a carrier which will normally have your car in a container, and they will put it on a ship. Once the ship arrives in the UK, the import process is really a reversal of the export process. So the information that you provided to the shipper before you left New Zealand will then be entered into the customs system, plus any extra information which the British Customs require in order to perform import formalities, collect any import duties and VAT and sales tax, before then authorizing your vehicle for release to you. At that point, the car will be in the UK, but it will still need registration and approval to drive on UK roads. So that's the procedure that we're going to follow, and this should help you understand why we need what we need and what the purpose of each step is. So the next slides are going to discuss that in more detail. But once you've got this in your head, it's a lot easier to understand why we're doing what we're doing, why we're doing what we're doing, and when we're doing it. Getting started on your research. Points to consider before deciding to import your car to the UK are many, but the main ones to focus on are cost and time. To make sure that what you decide to undertake fits within your expectations and time frame and wiggle room, and depending on your needs, time and cost will weigh differently in your decision. We will look at cost to determine whether shipping your vehicle is a good option, and points to consider are as follows, assuming you already own a vehicle and will need something similar at the other end once you have moved. Things that you need to know about will be questions such as how much is my vehicle worth if I sell it? So you may want to get it valued by a dealer or an expert. With this knowledge, you can look up the equivalent value in the local currency at your destination. In this case, British pounds or pound sterling. There are many good sites that give you this information. Personally, I like oanda.com as a currency converter. With the information, once you've converted your currency, you can then have a good idea what you will have to spend on your car once you're in the UK. And then sites that are listed below, like Auto Trader or British car dealer sites from the manufacturer, can be used to find out how much an equivalent car will cost. This information may alone be enough to make a decision as to whether you want to take the car or not, but it's also worth checking what will need to happen to make your vehicle suitable for UK road use. The main costs to find out are shipping costs, the costs of any modifications required, Common modifications will be changing the speedometer so that it reads miles per hour and adding a fog light. There may be others. There are also costs you may incur, such as import duty, VAT, or sales tax, or GST, and then the cost of registering the car to use on UK roads. Overall, the key costs are shipping, modification, transport, and registration. The second point to consider is time. Shipping a car from New Zealand to the UK takes about 8 to 10 weeks. Other journeys may take less time. Once the vehicle has arrived, registration and modifications can take another 4 to 6 weeks. So you need to be comfortable being without a car for that amount of time, or finding alternative arrangements until all the formalities for importing and clearing customs and registration are complete. At the bottom of the slide, you'll see there's some notices about places to check. So in addition to the Auto Trader site, which is an excellent site for checking up to the date and up to the minute costs of second-hand vehicles, you'll find that a lot of the information that we're going to discuss will be available on the www.gov.co.uk site. Okay, so we're going to move on now. So let's look at costs. To calculate costs, you will need to do some research, and the key things to bear in mind are shipping costs vary based on time and volume. So time here we mean by the time of year, potentially the time it takes to ship the goods. Often shipping costs are measured in cubic meters, and sometimes there's a reliance on weight, but mainly it will be on volume. Get quotes in writing, and there's a need to understand terms, the kind of packaging that will be used and the level of service offered. You also need to understand whether they're going to pick the vehicle up for you from an address that you nominate, or whether you're going to drop off at one of their depots. And then you'll need to understand also how long this quotation or quotations that you've received are valid. If you don't understand any of the terms in there, ask for advice and follow-up questions, and don't be afraid to negotiate. Obviously these are commercial services, so each of the companies is willing to negotiate to get the best deal, and your job is also to find the best deal. Key costs you'll need to be aware of are mainly the shipping fee, so how much is it going to cost to move the vehicle from end to end, from drop off in New Zealand or drop off in your third country to the UK and your pickup or delivery. Other costs that arise, you'll find in the small print, are little fees for processing and fees at the other end from the final agent. So do ask about those and make sure you understand what they are, so that when you'll get to the final country, you are not surprised by having some additional fees and you know exactly what they are. Once you arrive, there will be customs duty and VAT to pay unless your import vehicle qualifies for an exemption. And the two that we're going to look at in this presentation are the temporary import and importing as part of your belongings. So if you don't qualify for an exemption, you will need to pay customs duty and VAT. So the customs duty is usually calculated first, so that would be based on an invoice value. So in this example that I've put down, there's $30,000 as the car value. UK value, so we've just taken 50p as the value of the US dollar, making the car now worth £15,000. Duty is calculated at 10%. You can have a look at this in the .gov.uk site, and you need to go into the tariff within the customs site, and they will give you duties on imported vehicles, so that's 10%. So you'll need to add then another £1,500. And then on top of that, there's the customs VAT, which is usually applied on top. So the total will be 3,300 plus the 1,500 equals 4,800. So about $10,000. However, if you qualify for these exemptions, these fees will not be applicable. Beyond that, you will have to pay for registration and insurance. So let's move on. So the exemptions I was talking about are the transfer of residence. So if you import your vehicle as part of your personal belongings, then you'll qualify for this. And if you're importing your vehicle to the UK temporarily and then going to take it away, you will qualify for the temporary import. So briefly, the conditions for the transfer of residence are that private vehicles can be brought into the UK free of duty and tax, as long as you have a normal place of residence was outside the EU for a continuous period of 12 months. You've possessed and used the belongings for at least 6 months outside the EU before they're imported. You did not get it under a duty or tax-free scheme, and you will keep it in the UK for your personal use. And you do not propose to sell, lend, hire to others or dispose of it in the UK or anywhere else in the EU within 12 months of the date of importation, unless you tell British Customs HMRC first and pay the duty and VAT once you've disposed of it. You should note that the 12-month restriction period on the sale or disposal of your vehicle will start on the date that it arrives and is granted relief. And the vehicle should arrive no more than 12 months after the date you move or return to the UK. Customs may be persuaded to waive this condition in exceptional circumstances, if you can provide a reasonable explanation for the delay. So at the bottom of this slide, I've put in a link where you can find that information. Again, that's available on .gov.uk, and the material on .gov.uk is the reliable source material. All right. So if you want to use the transfer of residence to gain the TOR exemption, you will need to download a TOR1 form and read the accompanying notes from the .gov.uk website. So I've included a link, and the documents you'll need to enclose with that, correct in March 2020, are a black and white copy of the photo page from your passport and a copy of your UK visa if issued. You'll need a signed list of goods that you wish to import, and you need to identify any goods that are not eligible for TOR to establish the eligibility of the goods. This can be worked out with your shipper, and they may ask you for information prior to the shipment so they complete some of the paperwork on your behalf. Proof of residency in a country you're transferring from, showing your name and address of residence. For example, this might be a utility bill or a bank statement or something which has really got your address. Evidence of your right and intention to move to the UK. This could be a copy of the relevant signed page of your UK contract or a purchase or rental agreement for your proposed dwelling in the UK. Only the relevant signed page that clearly shows your name and address of residence needs to be submitted. This is an illustrative list, and if you don't have the above documents, you can supply alternative documentation to support your claim for the TOR. HMRC may request additional documentation to verify your application, so give as much information as you can in your application. If you are granted the relief, you will be given a unique declaration number. You or your third-party agent must then present this when making the import declaration using the Customs Procedure Code CPC 4000C001. And you can find out more about that by talking to your shipper or doing research online. If you've got any queries on the completion of this form, please contact the HMRC helpline, and there's a telephone number there, 0300 200 3700. If you fill in this form and then post it off to HMRC before you start to move any personal property to the UK, and depending on the timing and speed of the shipment, you may want to check in with UK Customs to see when the form needs to be sent in. If it's especially long or especially short, you might want to check that out. The other exemption I want to talk about are temporary imports. This exemption is included for reference. As the training is focusing mainly on permanent imports, this is where you take your vehicle to the country and you leave it there. The exemption here is really if you're bringing the vehicle to the UK and then taking it away again. The specific qualifications for this exemption are set out below, and I sourced the text from the .gov.uk website. Please check for continued validity. You can usually use a vehicle with foreign plates without registering or taxing it in the UK if all the following apply. You're visiting the UK and do not plan to live in the UK. The vehicle is registered and taxed in its home country. You only use the vehicle for up to 6 months in total, and this can be a single visit or several shorter visits over 12 months. It's for your own private use, and you're not a UK or EU resident. You do not sell, lend or hire it within the UK or the EU, and you re-export it from the UK or within the EU within 6 months or longer if you're eligible to use foreign plates for longer. So I put a relevant link below, and if you become a resident or stay for longer than 6 months, you must register and tax your vehicle in the UK. Follow the steps for importing a vehicle. If you wish to bring a vehicle from the EU, you will not usually have to pay VAT or duty. For more information, contact the Customs International Trade and Excise Team, CITEX, and I've put an email address and a telephone number and availability on UK time, should you wish to look at that. So once the vehicle's arrived in the UK, there are 5 steps to take. The first one is to tell HMRC or HM Revenue and Customs within 14 days that your vehicle has arrived. You then need to pay any VAT and duty if HMRC tells you to. Then you need to get vehicle approval to show your vehicle meets UK safety and environmental standards. Once you've done this, you can register and tax your vehicle with the DVLA, and they'll give you a registration number so you can get the plates made up. And then finally you must insure your vehicle so you can drive it on UK roads. And below I've put some links on the .gov.uk site relevant to importing your vehicle to the UK, and the Notice 5 of Transfer and Residence, which is helping you with the exemptions, which you'll need to be familiar with if you're following that. So to sum up, at this point in the process your vehicle will arrive in the UK. It will have completed its import formalities, and this will have been done using the documents you provided by the shipper. You will also have received a 13-character NOVA, which is short for Notification of Vehicle Arrival Number, and that should have come to you by post, and that will use the address that you gave in the transfer of residence documentation or the address that you would have given customs. For the next stage you will need to supply copies of documents, some of which you will already have submitted, to get your vehicle approved and registered. And so these are just listed below as examples, not as an exhaustive list, but you'll have your 13-character NOVA number, the passport, proof of address, proof of vehicle ownership, and previous certificates of registration, purchase invoices, and evidence of possession. This might include insurance in your previous country and maintenance payments. The final part of the job is to get the vehicle approved and registered. Basically, the car needs to be picked up from the shipper's depot and taken somewhere, either to your drive or off-road storage point if you don't intend to use it, or to an approval point where the car can have any modifications done that need to be done and any testing done that needs to be done. Although there may not be much going on, time is required to send and process documents, perform tasks and modifications to gain approvals. Given the logistics and time commitments, unless you are confident you know what you are doing, I would recommend using a specialist firm to help you get things right, remove delays, and give you peace of mind. The next slides will give you a flavor of what you need to think about. And you can see here in the process that I've drawn out is basically what needs to happen. So you can follow that through. You'll see that you pick it up on a truck from the shipper, it goes to a garage or registration firm, modifications are made, you then go through the registration and approval process, any modifications done, testing, if there's some remedial work to be done that needs to be redone, and then the forms need to be filled out so that the DVLA can register you. The DVLA is the Driver Licensing Agency. You will get an MOT as a warrant of fitness, and then road tax. And then the owner will arrange for vehicle plates and insurance to be done. And once that's done, you can take it away and drive it. The process can be quite time consuming and fiddly. So again, the reason for getting a professional firm to help is useful. Okay, the next slides refer to specific places and links you can go to find out more about registering and approving your vehicle. You can find out more by looking on the relevant.gov.uk links set out in the slides, or by doing your own research. So here I've put together what needs to happen and which links to go to get the environmental approval and to get your vehicle inspected and approved. Registering the vehicle, the DVLA and Vehicle Licensing Agency. So your vehicle may not have been registered before, likely that it won't have done, so you'll need to fill in the 55(4) form to register the imported vehicle. You will also need to provide copies of identity documents such as your photocard driving license with your application form to prove your identity. Alternative options are to provide a document that proves your name and another document that proves your address. So the examples there would be name, would be a passport, a marriage certificate, a decree nisi or absolute birth certificate, or a current UK paper driver license. And for a UK address, a recent utility bill, so that's something that's happened within the last 3 months. This might be a gas, electricity, water, landline, or recent building or bank statement, a medical card or council tax bill for the current year. You may also need to provide payment for the vehicle tax, the registration fee, a current MOT certificate if the vehicle is over 3 years old. Northern Ireland requires 4, and an insurance certificate or cover note if you're registering the vehicle to an address in Northern Ireland. And I've included some links below. If you have any problems, the best place to call is the DVLA helpline there on 0300 123 1272. This is a slide just as a short note about changing the speedometer to read in miles. There is a firm that specializes in making decals that can replace the current dials or be overlaid on the current dials, and these conform to the requirements which are listed on the slide here. You can check before you ship to make sure your car has a solution, or you can speak with a firm in the UK and they will make the changes for you once the vehicle gets there. So Lockwood International Limited is the company which I've used twice to do that for different imports, and this is just an example of a decal for a Mitsubishi, and you can go on their site and you can check to see if the decal is there that fits, and they're quite happy for you to give a call and to ask and do any follow-up work to make sure that they can supply what you need. You can also call firms in the UK to find out whatever else you want to in that regard. I've included the next slides to give you a rough idea of what you might have to pay for registration costs. Overall, the cost is likely to be around £1,500 if you get a professional company to do the modifications and to sort out the testing. One reason why you might want to use a professional firm is that they can transport the vehicle around much more easily unless you have a truck or are willing to look for somebody to do transport for you. So these really are just being blocked into modifications, government charges. So the government charges will be the same no matter what. The fees for fitting and doing modifications again will be optional depending on your car and what needs to be done on your car, and the service fees will be the same, and they will be charged depending on how many times you need to transport the vehicle around and the amount of time that the company needs to spend on your particular vehicle. Again, another set of fees basically for the same thing, slightly cheaper, but overall offering the same service. Again, it really depends on where the firm is located and whether you want to pick the vehicle up yourself or drop it off yourself, and how much you want to get involved doing yourself. Of course, if you don't use the firm, you won't have to pay the processing fees that the firm charges, but you will have to spend more time. You might get things wrong and you might have to redo things, which overall will increase the cost. So my recommendation would be use a professional firm. I've put a couple of company names down at the bottom there, so you might want to check those out. You can call them and you can discuss the issues at your leisure. Finally, having had your car registered and plated, it will now be available and ready to drive. However, before doing so, you will need to get the car insured. Insuring your vehicle in the UK is important, and there are a number of companies that will insure vehicles in the UK. The mainstream insurers, such as the Automobile Association or AA, Direct Line, banks, Admiral, RLAC are all companies that will insure vehicles, and you can find details on their websites. However, you may find, or you will find, that in certain circumstances, if your vehicle comes from abroad and is not sold in the UK, it's unlikely that they will have your exact vehicle type in their systems. And if this is the case, they will find difficulty in completing an insurance policy for you properly. You could fudge it, that might give you a bit of a risk. So if you do have difficulty finding the appropriate insurance from a mainstream supplier, there are several brokers that can help you find bespoke policies which will cater for imported vehicles. And so I've listed some below. They're about the same in terms of pricing. They do charge a brokerage fee, and if you can call those and find out exactly what it means for you. This is just a note slide. So this is here about the vehicle identification number. This is a unique vehicle number for your car, and every car has one of these. When you're asked for it by the shipping firm, this is what it looks like, and there's some ideas of where you might find it. So once you've completed all this, you will have moved your car from outside the UK to the UK. You'll have paid customs duty and VAT on it, or not if you're exempt, and you will have registered the vehicle. So the 6 key points for research and consideration before making up your mind is to look at the vehicle value and see if it makes sense, then look at the shipping costs, any import fees, UK registration costs, and then insurance. The insurance you're going to have to pay anyway, the registration cost you'll have to pay anyway. So the only other thing is the time scale is how long is it going to take, and can you accept the time. Otherwise, it's definitely a good thing to do, but you need to make up your mind for yourself. Thank you very much.